Hi guys. Oh wow, that's loud. So like Erin said, my name is Emma Western, and I would like to just start by telling you guys a little bit about my background. I grew up in a small Wisconsin town. I went to a good school. I had a good family, good friends. I was raised Lutheran. I went to church with my parents. My mom played in the church band. And overall, I like to think that I was a pretty good kid. I got good grades. I was salutatorian of my graduating class. Like I said, I had good friends. I had a job all throughout high school. People had high expectations for me, and I usually rose to them. So then, once I graduated high school, I decided that I was going to come here to St. Thomas. And still, there were those expectations that the adults in my life had for me. So right off the bat, I took 19 credits, and my advisor told me, if you give me a 4.0, I will approve you for taking 22 credits the next semester. So that's what I did. So then, second semester, freshman year, off I went, 22 credits. And it looked like my life was on the fast track to exactly where I wanted it to go. I got a research position in the physics department. I was working up in the observatory. I was doing well in my classes. My professors liked me. My boss liked me. And it just seemed like everything was falling in place. And then I found out I was pregnant. And all of those expectations that people had for me seemed to come crashing down. And I remember the night that I found out I was pregnant. It was a Thursday night. It was April 10th, to be exact. And I waited until I was alone. I lived in Grace, so I waited until my roommate was gone and my suite mates were gone. And I knew that I was late, but I was taking 22 credits. I figured it's just from stress. But I also figured I should check. I should know for sure. So I took the test, and that second pink line waited no time. It was just there. And I started to cry. So that night, I called 3 people. I called my best friend at the time. I called the dad, and he actually didn't answer. He was working. So I left him a voicemail that said, "Hey, call me back. It's important. I need to talk to you." And I don't know about you guys, but if I was a guy and I got a call from someone that I used to see saying, "Hey, I need to talk to you, it's important," and it sounds like they're crying, pregnant might be one of the first things on my list of what could be happening. So eventually he called me back that night, and we agreed to meet that Saturday to talk. But the third person that I called that night, this was the best decision I made. I called my sister. And I remember her reaction. It was absolute joy. She goes, "Oh my gosh, Emma, I'm so excited. We're going to be pregnant at the same time." Because she was pregnant with my nephew. And I felt very frustrated because I didn't feel like she was really understanding the situation. I was 19, I was a freshman in college. I wasn't even in a relationship at this point anymore. Pregnant, to me, didn't mean a good thing. But here was my sister, so excited. And looking back now, I am very grateful that she reacted the way she did, because she was the only one who, when they found out I was pregnant, that they reacted with joy, the only one. And what that means is that from the very beginning, someone was excited about joy. And yes, initially that someone was not me, and it should have been, but it wasn't. And I'm very grateful that someone was excited from the beginning for her. So my sister and I talked. We talked about my options. And we talked about me raising my baby. And I told her, I don't know how I would be able to do that. I don't have a stable life. My life is chaos. I don't know how I can raise a baby and give a baby the life that that baby deserves. And it was actually my sister who brought up abortion. And I said, Heidi, I'm not doing that. And there's this huge sigh of relief on the other end of the line. And she goes, oh my goodness, I'm so glad to hear you say that. I just had to check. And then she brought up adoption, which is something that I probably wouldn't have thought of on my own. And she told me that her best friend and her best friend's husband, throughout this talk, I will be calling them Matt and Katie. She told me that they were going to start looking into adoption again. And she wanted to know if I wanted her to talk to them for me. And at this point, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was panicking, I was scared, I didn't even know what I was feeling. But I figured I should probably keep my options open, so I told her, yes, why don't you talk to them for me? At least I don't want to close that door. So eventually I hung up with my sister, and I was still alone at this point. My roommate and my suite mates were still gone. And I just sat and I cried. And as wonderful as it was talking to my sister on the phone, I needed someone there physically with me because I was breaking down. I couldn't handle myself. And then I heard one of my suite mates come back to their dorm. And as much as I needed someone, I was terrified to cross the bathroom and tell them, because both of my suite mates were part of campus ministry. So they were very devout Catholics. And here I was, a pregnant, unwed Lutheran. So there's some bad blood between Catholics and Lutherans, and even though I was friends with my suite mates, I was terrified that there would just be a lot of judgment and a lot of hatred, and oh my gosh, Emma, how could you possibly do this? What were you thinking? That was my fear. But I needed someone. So I walked over, and initially it was just my one suite mate who was there. And I told her what was going on, and she sat with me on her bed, and we talked and I cried. That's pretty much how that happened. And eventually my other suite mate came back as well, and she found us like that. So obviously she asked, hey, what's happening? What's going on? But at this point, I'd already said the words, I'm pregnant, so many times, I couldn't say it again. So I just took out the test and I handed it to her. And she came on the bed with us, and they sat with me, and we talked, and I cried, and they hugged me. There wasn't judgment, there wasn't hatred. The only thing that came from them was love. That was it. It was not what I was expecting, but which was wonderful. And that continued throughout my pregnancy. My suite mates were two of the most wonderful people I know. Throughout my pregnancy, they were always asking about baby, asking, how big is she now? What can she do? Like, what fruit is she about the shape of? Because if you download the pregnancy apps, that's how they tell you, oh, you're week whatever, this is the size of your baby. They compare it to fruit, which is kind of weird, but it is what it is. And that was Thursday night. That was the night I found out I was pregnant. So Friday morning comes, and I just took everything I was feeling about pregnancy and I shoved it in a little box marked too painful to deal with and shoved it in the back of my brain. Because, do you guys need any help? You're fine. Yeah, so I took everything I was feeling, put it in a little box, and shoved it in the back of my brain because I didn't look pregnant, I didn't feel pregnant, so I'm not pregnant, right? That was my logic. It was faulty, but that was my logic. And I went on with my day and with my classes like I would normally. And it worked very well up until my last class of the day. It was physics. It was 2.5 hours. So my professor always gave us a break about halfway through. During that break, I looked at my phone and I had a missed call from my sister. So I called her back, and she told me that she had talked to Matt and Katie, and that they had told her that if I decided that I wanted to do an adoption, and that if I decided that I wanted to do an adoption with them, that their hearts and their home were open. But if I decided that I wanted to raise my baby, they would be 100% supportive of that decision as well. So of course I start bawling. But now I need to go back to class, which is a problem. So I go back in, go up to my professor and say, hey, I need to leave. Can I please have the homework assignment? So he takes one look at me, grabs the homework packet, says, come with me, takes me out to the hall, looks at me and says, you're crying, what is wrong? So, and it took me a while, but eventually I was able to say, I'm pregnant. And I don't really know what I was expecting from him, but he hugged me, which is probably the best reaction that he could have had. And he asked me if my parents knew yet. And I told him no, that I was planning on waiting like a week and a half to 2 weeks until I saw them in person so that I could tell them face to face. And he looked me dead square in the eye and he said, Emma, if you were my daughter, I would want to know. You can't wait. You need to tell your parents. And that is a large part of the reason why my parents found out that night. That night I was out to dinner with my best friend and her family, and I got a text from my sister. She was over at my parents' house with my niece, and she said, Mom and Dad are literally playing with a small child. Like, there is no better time. They're in grandparent mode. Call them now. So I called, and bless you, and sorry. And my mom answered the phone, but I was closer with my dad, so I asked to talk to him. And he gets on the phone, and he says, hey, grandbaby's over, make it quick. I said, okay, I'm pregnant. And there was a pause, and he said, okay, what do you want me to do about it? I said, I don't know. I'm scared, and I don't know what to do. And he said, okay, give me the night to think about it. I'll pick you up from your friend's house. We'll get breakfast Saturday morning, and we'll talk. And I thought that was very fair. I had just dropped this bombshell, literally no intro, just bam, you deserve at least the night to think about it and gather your thoughts. And I asked him if he wanted to give the phone to my mom so that I could tell her as well. And he told me that we would wait to tell her until after we had talked and figured out what we were going to do. And I said, okay. And later that night, he actually told her, and they talked about it themselves. So I was not the one to tell my own mother that I was pregnant. And I know that that probably hurt her a lot. And that is something that I do regret. I've never been extremely close with my mother, but she is my mother. And I should have been the one to tell her, and I wasn't. That was Friday. So Saturday comes, my dad picks me up. We decide in the car that we're going to go to Denny's. Then there's this awkward silence, because what really can you say? And he breaks the silence by saying, so where do you want to go? I said, what do you mean? I thought we were going to Denny's. He said, no, I mean for the abortion. I said, Dad, I'm not getting an abortion. What do you mean you're not getting an abortion? And we then proceeded to have what I will call a discussion about abortion in the middle of a crowded Denny's. Neither of us left that conversation very happy. And later that night, or later that day, it wasn't night yet, I got a call from my mom. And one of the first things I said was, Mom, I'm not getting an abortion. Because I had figured that her and my dad had agreed before I talked with him. And what my mom said was, I understand, but I just want to make sure that you understand all your options, which is mom speak for, you're making the wrong decision, let me convince you otherwise. And we then proceeded to have a discussion about abortion. And my mom came to the right conclusion that we just disagreed about when life began. So I said, okay, when is it no longer okay for me to get an abortion? And she told me at about 9 weeks. I said, okay, so what you're telling me is that at 8 weeks and 6 days, it's not a person, not a life, totally fine, no moral repercussions. I can get an abortion, not a big deal. But as soon as I hit 8 weeks and 7 days, now it is a life, it is a person, and it's not morally okay for me to get an abortion. I said, Mom, that doesn't make any sense. She said, well, you can't draw the line that thin. I said, okay, well, tell me how thick to draw that line, Mom, because at the end of the day, the argument's the same. You're telling me that 1 second, it is not a life, it is not a person, it has no rights, no dignity, no worth. Can discard it, not a big deal. But the very next second, it is a life, and it does have its own worth and dignity. Mom, that's not how life works. And neither of us left that conversation very happy either. And Saturday night came, and I met with the dad. And he agreed with me about not getting an abortion, which at this point was such a relief. I was going to take anyone in my camp who wanted to come. I was like, I will bake cookies, just anyone who wants to come, please be on my side. And it was wonderful that he agreed with me about that. But he told me that he didn't want to be a dad. And I couldn't fault him for that. At that point, I didn't want to be a mom. I didn't know how to be a mom. And I told him about Matt and Katie, and I told him their story. I told him how they had been through hell and back together, through the death of their child and through the death of the stillborn. And I told him how they were two of the most generous and kindest people and parents that I had ever met. And I told him how I knew that it wouldn't matter to them that a baby wasn't biologically theirs, that they would love it just as deeply as they would their own children. And I told him that I was very seriously considering an adoption with them. And he told me that he would probably want to meet them first, but that he would support whatever decision I made, and that he would do whatever he needed to do, whether that be go and meet with lawyers, sign paperwork, whatever needed to happen to make the process easier, which I appreciated. And that was the last time that I saw him for 10 months until we signed away our parental rights. That was Saturday. So at this point, there were two things that I needed to do. The first thing that I needed to do was I actually needed to make my decision. The second thing that I needed to do was I needed to get very good very quickly at ProLife Arguments. And I did that in a couple of ways, mostly just by research. Some of that was religion-based, some of that was science-based. But the phrase kept going through my mind, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I thought, okay, how much is a video worth then? So I went to YouTube. And the great thing about YouTube is that it has almost everything, including abortion videos. And you can go on there and you can watch them all. And I did. First trimester suction up to late third term partial birth abortion. They're all on there. After a certain point, you do need to sign it and say, yes, I am 18, because they get very graphic very quickly. And those videos are not for the faint of heart. They are very graphic. They will make you cry, and they will probably make you gag. But those videos are very important because you can't really fight for or against something until you know what that something is. And you can read about abortion, you can listen to people talk about abortion, but until you see it, until you see them take that baby out with its arms and its legs moving, until they cut the neck, until you physically watch that, you don't know what abortion is. And one of the videos, besides that one, that stuck with me was a first trimester. The baby was still small enough that they could use suction. And they put the suction in, and the baby tried to kick away. But you're in the womb. You can't go anywhere. And eventually, suction got to the baby and pulled off his limbs one by one. But the thing is, the baby was positioned in such a way that its face was facing the ultrasound, because they did this one under ultrasound guidance. That's why you can watch it on YouTube. And as they suctioned off his limbs, his mouth opened in a scream. And when I watched that video, I realized that if I were to get an abortion, that scream would be happening inside of me. And I was not willing to allow someone to go inside of me and end a life that I was supposed to protect. Because now that was my job. So what I did was, for some of the videos, I actually sent them to my parents. And I said, watch these. My mom told me that she didn't need to watch them. And I told her, well, you can't really expect me to get a procedure if you're not willing to watch what it is. But eventually, because I don't think that they actually ever fully watched any of them, so I stopped doing that after a while. But so the other thing that I needed to do at this point was I needed to actually figure out what I was going to do, what decision I was going to make. And in front of me, I saw 5 doors. The first door was labeled, I raise my baby. The other doors were labeled abortion, closed adoption, open adoption without Matt and Katie, and an open adoption with Matt and Katie. And, I'm a physics major, so I like to think that I'm fairly logical. At least I try to be. So I made a list of pros and cons for every door. And that exercise turned out to be entirely useless, because some pros weighed more than some cons and vice versa. So I threw those away. But now I'm back to square one. How do I make my decision? So I sat down and I said, okay, Emma, if your baby comes back to you 20 years from now and asks you why you made the decision you made, what answer are you going to have for every door? And I wrote down my answers. And then I said, okay, would you be okay giving that answer? But more importantly, would you be okay receiving it? Because that's what matters. And when I looked at my answers, that is what made my decision for me. The abortion door was already slammed shut for reasons, among others, that I haven't told you. But the closed adoption door, that door was shut because that door meant that I would be trusting an agency to find a family and vet that family for me. I would have no way of knowing if that family was a good family, if they would be good to my baby. And I would have no way of knowing if she was healthy, if she was happy, if she was all right. And that wasn't something that I was comfortable with. So that door was shut. And the open adoption door without Matt and Katie was shut for basically the same reason. Because that door meant that I only had a short span of time, a few months, to get to know a family well enough to say, yep, I trust you, here's my baby. And I didn't think that I could do that. I didn't think that I would be comfortable enough with a family to trust them with something that precious. Which left 2 doors. I raise my baby and an open adoption with Matt and Katie. And the answer for the door labeled, I raise my baby, went something like this. You are my baby. You were mine. And even though, if you made a list of logistically, here are all the things that you need to raise a baby, even though I had none of that. I didn't have a stable relationship. I didn't have a stable income. I didn't have a stable job. I didn't have a car. I didn't have anything. Even though I had none of that, you were my baby. The only thing I had to offer you was love, but you were mine. You were my flesh and blood. why would I give up what was mine? And the door labeled open adoption with Matt and Katie, that answer went something along the lines of this. I knew that I could not give you the life that you deserve, and Matt and Katie can do that and more. They are already excited about you. They are kind, they are generous, they are loving. They will treat you just like they would treat their own biological children. And to them, there will be no distinction between you and between the others. It won't matter to them. They can give you stability, something that right now I have no hope of giving you. And when I looked at those answers, I remembered something that I had realized from watching the strong women in my life. A lot of it from watching Katie. From watching them, I had realized what a mother is. And I had realized that what a mother is selfless. What a mother does is make sacrifices. Whether that's going sleepless nights because you're rocking a baby who's teething, whether that's saying no to that second cookie and dealing with a 3-hour temper tantrum, whether that's taking a second job, going back to school to better yourself, whether that's dealing with your own health issues that seem like a pain, but you just need to deal with them temporarily until your babies will be okay. I realized that what a mother does is a mother doesn't put herself first. She puts her baby first. And when I compared that realization to the answers that I had written, my choice was clear. Because the answer for the door labeled, I raised my baby, I would not have been okay receiving that answer. Because what that answer told me was that I was being selfish. I was not putting my baby first. And what that meant is that I came to the realization that I was not what was best for my baby. I was not her best shot. That was Matt and Katie. And as much as that realization hurt, once I knew it, I couldn't ignore it. And then my decision became easy. Because that meant that that door had to shut. Because I had to be a mom. I had to protect her. I had to put her first. And that meant that she couldn't be with me. So my decision was made. And the time span here, I found out I was pregnant on a Thursday. By that Saturday, I was about 85% sure of what I was going to do. Within 2 weeks, my decision was made. I don't think anyone really knew fully how set I was. I think probably a lot of people in my family expected that I would change my mind. That I would say, no, I want my baby, I want to raise her. But the funny thing about beliefs is that once you know what yours are, any decision you have to make becomes fairly easy. That doesn't mean that the path is, but the decision itself is, because you know what aligns with your beliefs. So my decision was set. So the nice thing was, since I made my decision so early, Katie was actually able to come with me to all of my doctor visits, except for one, and that was because I got there early and they squeezed me in before my actual appointment time slot. And I know that was wonderful for her because she was able to be involved and share in those experiences with me. But her being there was also extremely helpful for me because that meant that every couple of weeks I got to see how excited she was and how excited Matt was and how just in love with this baby they were that they had never even met. And that was just extremely wonderful. And I remember the first doctor visit. I was terrified, which seems to be like the theme throughout all of this. But I was very scared because I didn't really know what to expect. And they give you an ultrasound, which these are some of those pictures. And I remember freaking out because she was in there having her own little dance party, and her heartbeat was going, and I could feel nothing. And that terrified me, because I'm like, there is something happening inside of me that I am not feeling. Is that okay? Like, should I be feeling something? And I remember Katie just standing there holding my hand, telling me, yes, yes, it's okay. That means that she's healthy. That's wonderful. That's how it's supposed to be. And the thing is, when I went for this ultrasound, at that doctor visit, they told me, this is how far along you are, this is when your due date is, all of that information. I was 8 weeks and 6 days, which doesn't mean a whole lot to you guys, but that was before the deadline that my mom had given me. And when you look at these pictures, you can see her little legs, you can see her arms, you can see her brain, you can see her heart. Yes, her head is abnormally large, but she grew into it, I promise. And I may have called her my little alien for a while, but it's okay. She was her own human, her own person already. But I was before the deadline that I had been given. And had I made a different decision, this doctor visit could have gone very differently. And that was very sobering to me. And this doctor visit also made it very real for me, because yes, I had morning sickness, but I still didn't look pregnant, I still didn't feel pregnant. And even though I had made my decision, it was all still kind of dealing with the abstract at this point. Until the pictures came, because the pictures are worth 1,000 words. And I was like, oh, this is really happening. Okay. And this was what was made it real. This was what made it real. So eventually, my dad actually started coming with to the doctor visits as well. And when I say come with, I don't just mean that he sat in the waiting room. I mean he literally came with into the doctor's office. And that was really wonderful, because then, he could see how excited Katie was every couple of weeks, but he could also talk to my doctor, and he could find out, how big is she, like what can she do at this point, like what can she like blink, like what is she doing in there? And I think that also made it real for him. And I started to see a change slowly take place within him. And that change came to fruition after Joy was born. Because the morning after she was born, I was laying in the hospital and I got a call from my dad. And he told me that after they had taken Joy to the nursery and after Matt and Katie had held her, that they gave her to my parents to hold. And he told me that I had made the right decision back in April, and that he was sorry that he had pushed me any other way, and that I had been right. And I think it's very easy to look at my story and look at the beginning and say, your parents pushed you for an abortion, they tried to isolate you from your sister, they are villains. It's very easy to say that. But that's not true. They were parents who were scared. I was their baby. I was their little girl. If they were to write you a plan for this is what we want her to do in her life, being a mom at 19 was not on that list. Nowhere near it. And they were scared. And one of the things that I was told when I went to the March for Life was that a lot of women who get abortions come from a Christian background. And it's when they find out they're pregnant, they go to their parents, they go to their church and they say, I'm pregnant, what do I do? And it's those people who tell them, go get an abortion, it'll solve your problem. And when I heard that for a minute, I was like, that seems really weird to me. But then I realized, wait a minute, Emma, you were raised Lutheran. Your family's Lutheran. Isn't that exactly what happened to you? And I think the important thing to take from my story, one of the important things, is that my parents weren't villains. And it's not about where you begin on a journey, it's where you end. Because yes, they began someplace that wasn't the best. But they ended in a place that was, you made the right decision, and I am so thankful that you did. And I think that that's very important. And one of the other things that I wanted to say was that the professors at St. Thomas are absolutely wonderful. I was due the Friday of finals week. Great timing, right? Yeah. So at the beginning of the semester, I had to go to all of my professors and say, hey, I am with child. Here's my due date. What happens if I go early? And all of them said, don't worry about it. If you need to miss class, if you can't take the final right away, I'll just give you an incomplete. You can finish it up over J term or over the summer, over spring semester. Don't worry about it. You take care of you and you take care of baby. School is second right now. And all of the professors were wonderful. They were all very caring. Since I'm a physics major, I'm closest with the professors in the physics department. And they went to, they were just wonderful. I had a modern lab, and in that lab, we dealt with very small amounts of radiation. And before we actually dealt with any radiation, I did the math and said, the maximum amount of radiation that I will be exposed to is this. And the math told me, she'll be fine, it's not gonna affect her at all. But before I had done the math, I was kind of freaking out, because I'm like, radiation is bad. And I went to the chair of the department, and then also my lab instructor, and said, yeah, so can we do anything about this? And I said, well, we'll just have your lab partners handle the radiation, because I told them that I didn't want to drop the class if I didn't have to. They said, and we can also go and purchase like a lab coat to protect you from the radiation. I was like, how much would that cost? Would I have to pay for that? They're like, no, we'll take care of it. You're a student here. This is what we do. And the professors were just absolutely wonderful. So is the counseling. So are the counseling services here. It was actually my advisor who pushed me to go to them. And that was also one of the probably better decisions that I made. They're very caring, and they're wonderful to talk to, and just to get your thoughts out. If you ever don't know what to do, I do recommend going to the counseling services. But one of the things that most pregnant women will tell you is that once you, or people who have had, women who have had children, is that once you hit like the end of the third trimester, they're like, yep, I'm ready, get this baby out of me, I'm done being pregnant. Like, I am front heavy, I am sore everywhere, my waddle game is so strong. Like, I am ready to be done. And I was quite large and feeling that same way. But I was conflicted, because part of me was, I am so uncomfortable, please get this baby out of me. But part of me was also, please do not get this baby out of me. Because I knew that once her birthday came, that was my goodbye. And the thing was, I didn't know how to say goodbye. Because she had been with me for 40 weeks. And I had bonded with her. You know, she loved music, and I knew the music that she loved, and she would have a little dance party, just like she did when she was littler, I guess. And I didn't know how to say goodbye. I didn't know how I was supposed to do that. And I knew that I wasn't ready. But whether or not I was ready, that was irrelevant, because she was ready. It was her time. And her birthday came. And when she cried for the first time, I cried. And then they handed her to me, and I bawled. And my sister was with me in the room, and she started crying. And then the nurses around us started crying, and the anesthesiologist and the doctors. And it was just a ball fest. Because it was a small hospital, so they all knew what was going on. And eventually the time came when I did have to say goodbye. And I had to give her to my doctor so that she could go meet her mom and dad. And later that night, I texted Katie because I knew it was irrational, but there were things that I had wanted to say to Joy that I felt that I hadn't been able to say in front of my sister and the nurses and the doctors. And I knew she was a newborn. She couldn't understand anything I was saying. But there were things that I felt that I needed to tell her, even if she wouldn't know. So I asked Katie if it would be all right if the next day I held her for 5 or 10 minutes. She said, of course. So about lunch, the day after she was born, they wheeled her up. And I fully intended it only to be 5 to 10 minutes. But my doctor actually came in during that time because she needed to talk to me. I was having health issues. So that 5 to 10 minutes turned into an hour. And that hour is something that I cherish very much. Soon enough, that hour also had to come to an end. And I had to say goodbye for a second time. And I had to give her back to the nurse. And one of the takeaways that I want you guys to leave my talk with is that adoption doesn't mean that you don't love your baby. And I know that there still is a stigma about adoption in our culture. I know that. When we talk about adoption, we talk about it from the perspective of the child who finally found their forever home. We talk about it from the perspective of the adoptive parents and how hard it is to adopt and how crazy expensive it is to adopt. And both of those views are extremely important to talk about it, and we do need to talk about them because the systems are broken and they do need to be fixed. But we don't talk about it from the perspectives of the birth mom. And because of that, I think that there is this idea that some people have that if you gave your baby up for adoption, that means that you didn't love your baby because you weren't willing to raise them. And that's not what it is at all. There was nothing that I wanted more in this world than to raise my daughter. Absolutely nothing. But I knew that I was not who she needed. I knew that I could not give her her best shot at life. That was Matt and Katie. They were who she needed to be with. They were her best shot. And they already loved her. Before they met her, they loved her. And I promise you that any woman who goes through an adoption and who says goodbye once or twice, and if it's an open adoption, and if she goes to see her child, it's like she gets her heart ripped out every time. There's no way that anyone could do that if they did not love their child. Adoption does not mean that you don't love her. Adoption does not mean that you don't care. It means that you love her enough to realize that you are not what is best for them. And you're willing to sacrifice to give them what is best for them. So one of the things that I hear about abortion is that it's empowering to women. Let me tell you some of the things that I was told when I was pregnant. I was told that abortion was the right choice, that it was the smart choice. I was told that I wasn't strong enough. I was told that my pregnancy was a battle between myself and my baby. I was told that I couldn't continue my education, my career, and have my baby. I was told you had to choose. You couldn't do both. What about any of that sounds empowering to women? Does any of it sound empowering to women? Telling me that my options are limited, that I can't do everything. Does that sound empowering to you? Because it doesn't to me. And one of the other things that I also hear is that abortion is a woman's right. Let me tell you something. It didn't matter whether she was about 9 weeks gestation. It didn't matter whether she was about 20. It didn't matter if she was hours after birth. It didn't matter if she was weeks or months or a year after she was born. All of these stages, she was just as much a woman as I was. Where were her rights? Who was standing up and shouting, no, you can't do that. She is a woman too. If the right to abortion is supposed to trump the right to life, how is it a right at all? Because had her right to life been taken away, she doesn't have any other rights after that. She doesn't have the right to vote. She doesn't have the right to anything. One of the other things that I was told during and after my pregnancy was that Joy was a problem, that she was a mistake. Joy is smart. Joy is a wonderful big and little sister. She is sassy. Yes, just like her. Yes. She is many things. She is a blessing. She's not a problem. She's not a mistake. She may not have been planned, but she was the best thing that ever happened to me. And if I had to go back and do it all again, I would. She is not someone to fear, just like unplanned pregnancies are not something to fear. One of the things that my sister and Katie kept telling me when I was pregnant is that a baby is always wanted. And it doesn't matter if she's not in your plans. She's in his plans. And I'm so thankful that she was in his plans. But what I want you guys to do is, I don't want you to be the people that were in my life that were telling me that I wasn't strong enough and that I had to choose. I want you to be someone's Katie, someone's Heidi, someone's Emma, someone's any. I don't care whether it's your sister, your daughter, your granddaughter, your best friend, your roommate, some girl that you've talked to twice who sits across you in class. Because odds are someone you know is going to face an unplanned pregnancy just like I did. And they're going to have the people in their life who tell them that they're not strong enough, that they can't do it. And I want you to be the person that says, what are you talking about? They're crazy. Of course you can do it. Don't be ridiculous. Because meeting my Joy was very bittersweet. Because our meeting was also a goodbye. But the thing was, I got to meet her. And there are people who don't get to do that. And what I want to leave you guys with is this. Please meet your Joy.